The Denver Nuggets and Golden State Warriors played a pretty dramatic game last night that ended with a game-winning bank shot 3 from Nikola Jokic, and immediately following that, there's been a little bit of a shitstorm from Jonathan Kuminga and just the Warriors' overall situation. Hello everybody, welcome to Asa Rusty Bucket. Subscribe to the channel if you have not already and drop a like on this video. It only takes 1 second and it makes a massive difference in how the video performs in the YouTube algorithm, so it is very, very much appreciated. Also, finally, we have our new editor in place, and it is going to be Nick, aka Motown Noah, as you may know him. He also is hosting the Coping Hour podcast over on his channel now.
What was the other thing I said? I don't do ads on this show. That's like the goal, by the way, is that I can sell this shit to somebody. But I just gotta stop talking about bombs in January 6th. And then someone will give me an ad to read.
So go check that out. It's really, really, really good. His link is going to be in the description and all that. But with that said, everybody welcome Nick with open arms. I'm happy he's here. You should be happy he's here too. But with that said, let's go ahead and get into these topics. I'm going to talk about both of last night's games, neither of which I really expected to be particularly good games, but they ended up being exactly that. And then we could talk some of this Jonathan Kuminga, Steve Kerr news drama, if you will. So with that said, I'm going to open up just with this Bucks versus Spurs game. This game ended up being exciting on two fronts. First of all, we got Wemby versus Giannis for the first time, so we got to see Freak of Nature versus somehow even bigger Freak of Nature. The bigger Freak of Nature is Wemby, of course. The other part of that game that I really thoroughly enjoyed is that Trey Jones got the start, and while it wasn't like an assist factory in this game, in general, the ball found Wemby's hands when it needed to far more often than it has to this point in the season, which, as you guys well know, is something I have complained about time and time again pretty much every time I mention the Spurs in general or mention Wemby in general. Victor managed to have 27 points in 26 minutes along with 5 blocks, including blocking Giannis. He had a couple of ridiculous plays on offense, the main one that stands out to me being when he went behind his back. I don't remember who the defender was. It might have been Malik Beasley. I don't remember. But he goes around his back on a guard and then dunks on Brook Lopez. So that was really cool to see. On the Bucks end of things, Giannis had 44 points. Dame had 25 and 10. It was a relatively standard Bucks game. Giannis didn't seem all too deterred by Wemby in the paint, even though he did get a couple of blocks. In general, didn't really seem to bother him all that much. And Giannis has been kind of ridiculous this year in terms of finishing in the paint. I think the Damian Lillard trade really opened up the rim for him, which has only made him more dominant inside than he already obviously very much was. On the Spurs end of things, outside of Wemby, outside of Trey, we also got a really big Devin Vassell game. And the closing minutes of this game was really exciting. I'm not surprised that the Bucks ended up pulling through, but the Spurs looked good. They looked competitive. I liked what Victor did. And I really hope that this means that Trey Jones is going to be starting for the foreseeable future. From what I understand, this starting situation happened because of an injury, but I would hope that Greg would look at this situation and seeing them manage to be competitive with the Bucks, who have like the second or third best record in the NBA at this point, and view that as a sign of like, maybe we should try this. Or maybe he'll do the exact opposite and acknowledge the fact that they're trying to tank and just cut Trey Jones out of the rotation entirely. I don't know. But overall, not a lot to add to this one, but it was a very exciting game. I would recommend you at least watch the highlights if you didn't catch this one. But the game that really sparks the larger conversation is Nuggets versus Warriors. And this was another very close, very exciting game. Although I don't know that it should have been close, because the Warriors were actually kicking Denver's ass for a lot of this game, especially in the third quarter. We truly got the third quarter Warriors in this game. Steph was going off. Klay Thompson was going off in this game, which is nice because Klay has been pretty bad this year. And in general, everything offensively was flowing super well, super easy. In the first half, Jonathan Kuminga was having a very good game. He played a little bit of the third quarter, towards the start, and then he did not play the final 18 minutes of the game. So the last half of the third quarter and the fourth quarter, Jonathan Kuminga was sitting on the bench. This in spite of the fact that he was scoring the ball really well. I believe he had about 18 points or so by the time that he was no longer in the lineup. And the thing about that is, the Warriors blew an 18-point lead. They blew that lead primarily because they couldn't score the ball. Now, normally in these situations late in the game, they rely upon Stephen Curry, as you naturally do with any superstar player. However, Curry was not hitting his shots like he normally does. I don't know what was up. For the most part, these were shots that I thought he was fairly capable of. I do think Denver did a pretty good job of making sure he didn't get any clean looks, but Steph does not need super clean, super open looks in order for him to hit shots. And there were a handful of shots in this game down the stretch that I was like, damn, I can't believe Steph didn't make that. It was a lot easier for Denver to load up on and focus on Steph Curry because there were no other real scoring threats on the floor save for a catch and shoot from Klay Thompson. But whether it was Andrew Wiggins or Chris Paul or Kevon Looney, whoever they went with, other than maybe a little bit of Dario Saric, no real offensive threat for real on the floor because Wiggins has been incredibly bad this year. Chris Paul doesn't really scare anybody in terms of putting the ball in the basket anymore, and Kevon Looney's never been a scoring player. All the defense did was focus in on Stephen Curry, make sure not to leave Klay Thompson wide open because otherwise there's not much he's going to do, and they just made the offense completely stagnate. The Nuggets were able to go on a pretty quick run. This was sparked by Aaron Gordon, who was, I believe this is first game back since he got attacked by his dog, which is a wild reason to miss games, but he seems to be all right. Hit a corner three, got a backdoor cut for a layup, got a backdoor alley-oop later in the game, got to the free throw line a few times. Jokic got to the free throw line, and suddenly, within a couple of minutes, I think it was a 16-point game with 5 minutes left. That's a pretty good lead. That's a lead that you don't blow very easily. But offensively, the Warriors could not get anything going, and the Nuggets started to figure out their offense quite a bit. It got real ugly. I think having someone like Jonathan Kuminga on the floor would have made a real difference. Someone who, if you double Steph, whether he's shooting the ball or just attacking, he'll be able to put pressure on the defense. And whether that results in Steph getting open or Klay getting open or one of their more offensively inept players getting a clean look, whatever it may be, the dynamic that you bring to offense by just having more options on the floor. I realize I'm describing something pretty fucking obvious, but that's what's maddening about this situation. It is obvious that Kuminga should have been playing. Maybe not at the very end of the game, but he sure as shit shouldn't have missed 18 minutes because he wasn't doing anything wrong. And that's kind of the point that I always arrive to in this situation is what exactly the fuck is Steve Kerr expecting Kuminga to do? Offensively speaking, his three ball is not going in this year, and that's definitely not good. But otherwise, he has been awesome from mid-range. He's been awesome attacking the basket. He was really good in this game in terms of scoring the ball, and that's something that we've been talking about the Warriors being in desperate need of. And if you look at Kuminga's career to this point, if you look at his per 36, I understand per 36 is a flawed stat, but he averages 18, 20 points per game every year of his career. So he puts the ball in the basket. Even per 100, he averages 25. We're talking about someone who can score on a team that is in desperate need of scoring, and instead, fucking Corey Joseph or a disastrously bad this season Andrew Wiggins is getting in there over Kuminga. And it's not like areas outside of scoring the ball Kuminga's failing at. He's a pretty strong rebounder. He's solid enough defensively. I don't know if he's necessarily impressive on that end, but he's not a super big negative. And if you look at the plus minus of the players on this team who are playing big minutes, who are playing the amount of minutes that Kuminga is, or more than that, he has one of the best plus minuses on the entire team. So he's impacting winning. And on top of that, up until this report has come out, which if you don't know, I guess I'll introduce it at this point, a report came out that Kuminga has lost faith in Steve Kerr. And that's important and specific wording because that's something that has been questioned about him, and he has specifically said to the media before that he trusts Steve Kerr, that the minutes situation is like a motivating factor for him, and that he knows he'll get in there eventually. But at a certain point, you reach your breaking point. And I was on the podcast right before this talking with Alex, Hoops, and Rudy. Go check out the pod if you haven't already. I very much enjoy doing that with those two, and it invokes a more interesting conversation, just having other voices outside of my own. Alex said essentially, like, it's like having a job where you're year after year not getting promoted despite doing the work, despite doing and saying the right things. At a certain point, you're just going to say, all right, fuck this. I don't want this job anymore. At that point, we arrive to the question, what happens from here? Is Jonathan Kuminga going to stay with the Warriors? Or is Steve Kerr going to stop being a stubborn butthead? Because frankly, he has been extremely stubborn the past 2 seasons and especially this year. We have seen some adjustments to the lineup that I want to give him some credit for not being fully locked in, but at the same time, I don't know if I even want to give him that credit because he's still not going nearly as far as he needs to. And something like starting Kuminga, something like playing Kuminga a lot is something that he needs to do, the Warriors need for their own success. And it just, at a certain point, it seems like Steve has a vendetta against younger players. Because another guy who's not getting enough burn is Moses Moody, who has been consistently a really positive and good role player throughout his entire career, but for some reason there's just this super short leash. Anytime he makes a mistake, he's out of the game. And to a degree that happens with Kuminga too. And it's like, I understand the precedent and the being grandfathered in of the past success of the Warriors' big three, and Andrew Wiggins on top of that, Chris Paul obviously having the reputation he does throughout his career, but straight up they are playing worse basketball players that's just fucking dumb. That's not going to help your franchise, and it's only going to piss off the players that actually deserve to play those minutes. And if you're worrying about pissing off the players who are getting those minutes instead, well, fuck them for playing worse. Okay, straight up, you need to be cutthroat, and you can't be babysitting these guys just to fuck over the other guys. That's not how you need to operate. That's not what's going to work, and that's self-evident. I'm not normally one to sit here and just say I straight up know more than an NBA coach, because frankly, I don't. But at least in this specific context, Steve Kerr is in the wrong. Kuminga has every right to be upset. And the disastrous season that the Warriors have been having, even though they've been playing better of late and they looked good for a lot of this game, almost all of that can be attributed to mismanagement. And at a certain point, you go, okay, are we going to keep letting Steve Kerr fuck up the potential success of this team just because he was the reason we got success in the first place? Or do we look to make a change? And me personally, I don't think it'll ever happen, but it might be the right move. Steve Kerr is a great coach all time, but he's been probably one of the worst coaches in the entire league this season as far as I am concerned. At the very least, not in the top 10. And the Warriors could really use someone who is in that tier because the talent that they used to have, the overwhelming talent that they used to have, just isn't there to the degree that it used to be. Steph Curry is still Steph Curry, and that's awesome, but Clay ain't Clay, Draymond ain't Draymond, and even though he's 28, Andrew Wiggins ain't Andrew. On that front, that's outside of Steve Kerr's control. I'll give him that. But adjusting from that and acknowledging the reality of the situation, rather than sticking your head in the sand, that's what's necessary at this point. and we can only ignore it for so long. It's just very frustrating to me. And I care about this more than I otherwise would for any other franchise in the world, because I am a Stephen Curry fan. Stephen Curry is my second favorite player of all time and my favorite active player. I don't like at any point seeing a superstar player being wasted, but in this instance, it's even more personal to me, because I think if you have a superstar player, you do everything in your power to capitalize on that and win a title with that player. And they have that with Stephen Curry right now. I understand that they've already won 4 with him, but I don't think you should operate with the mindset of we've won 4, therefore who gives a shit what we do now. No, you maximize what you have while you have it so that you can get the best resume, the best career, and the most titles hanging up in that arena. But instead, they seem to want to coast on the past and not acknowledge reality, and it's just frustrating. And I think Kuminga has every right to make a big deal of this to the media. I don't even know exactly how this quote or information came out, but it came through official channels, so seems to be true. And I think if I was in Kuminga's position, I would lose faith in them. Like, think about it from this perspective. Kuminga is in his 3rd year. He was the 7th pick in the draft. Every time he has played, he has gotten better, and at this point, he is one of the better players on the team. And yet, he is delegated to being babied like this, to just suddenly being cut out of the rotation. And you got to think about this from the perspective of, like, a player who was projected to be one of the, if the 7th pick in the draft is a guy who has the potential to be a really, really good NBA player, that guy has not been afforded the opportunity at all to actually prove what he's capable of for his contract that's following his rookie deal. When it comes time for that rookie extension, I imagine the Warriors would lowball him, that based on the precedent that they established for him, and then other teams in the league are like, I'm not going to pay Kuminga real money because he hasn't played enough and proved that he's worth that money. So it's just it's a big loss for him, and at a certain point, there is no benefit to him being patient. So when you fail to provide the benefit of that patience, that's on you. That's on Steve Kerr, and a lot of the Warriors' failings have been on Steve Kerr. I don't think he should be fired, and I don't think Kuminga should be traded. I think they should just simply fucking play Kuminga and move on. But at the very least, if that's what's required for something to be different, then, well, I guess that's what's required for something to be different. Either way, do a better job of being a team around one of the greatest players of all time, because it's frustrating to most of us, unless you just hate Steph, in which case this is awesome for you. Yeah, but otherwise, that is it. Shout out to Nick for editing this video, but that is it. Goodbye.